A similar question to you, Congressman Paul. You have some bold ideas, some very fervent supporters, and probably the most organized ground campaign here in Iowa. But there are many Republicans inside and outside of this state who openly doubt whether you can be elected president. How can you convince them otherwise? And if you don't wind up winning this nomination, will you pledge here tonight that you will support the ultimate nominee?
Well, fortunately for the Republican Party this year, probably anybody up here could probably beat Obama. So the challenge isn't all that great on how we're going to beat Obama. I think he's beating himself. I think really the question is what do we have to offer? And I have something different to offer. I emphasize civil liberties. I emphasize a pro-American foreign policy, which is a lot different than policemen of the world. I emphasize, monetary policy and these things that the other candidates don't talk about. But I think the important thing is the philosophy I'm talking about is the Constitution and freedom. And that brings people together. It brings independence in the fold, and it brings Democrats over on some of these issues. So therefore, I see this philosophy as being very electable because it's an American philosophy. It's the rule of law. And it means that, we ought to balance the budget. It opens up the door for saying, supporting my willingness to cut $1 trillion out of the budget the first year.
Well, as Governor Huntsman just mentioned, there is a real drama playing out real time in Washington right now, with the threat of yet another government shutdown, the possibility that millions of Americans could see their payroll taxes go up. If you're president, as is the case now, and you're at loggerheads with one chamber of Congress, how would you handle this situation?
Getting this done.
Congressman Paul.
The main problem we have is the government's too big and the debt is too big, and you have to cut spending. So you have to get people to come together. They've been coming together to increase the spending for decades. We have to get them to come together to do the opposite. But there are two factions up there. One want welfare and the other want warfare around the world and policing the world. So you go to the people who like the warfare and say, give me half of the cuts that have to be in the welfare. Go to the welfare people and say, you give me the cuts to cut the overseas warfare spending, and bring people together and live up to what they say.
Paul, you are, and having been in this town for, 48 hours now, you are all over Iowa TV these days with a negative ad about Speaker Gingrich. You accuse him of selling access and playing the corrupt revolving door game. What about the explanation you just heard that he's in the private sector and this is free enterprise?
Well, he has a different definition of the private sector than I have, because it's a GSC, government-sponsored enterprise. That's completely different. It's a government agency. They get the money and sponsorship. They get mixed up. It's the worst kind of economy. Pure private enterprise, more closely probably what Governor Romney is involved with. But if it's government-sponsored, it's a mixture of business and government. It's very, very dangerous. Some people say if it goes to extreme, it becomes fascism, because big business and big government get together. So yes, they get money. And I was talking about that for a long time, the line of credit, the excessive credit from the Federal Reserve, the Community Reinvestment Act. For 10 years or so, the Austrian economists knew there was a bubble, and at this time, nobody was listening or doing anything in the Congress. And then to go to work for them and get money from them, it literally is it's literally coming from the taxpayer. They went broke. We had to bail them out. So indirectly, that was money that he ended up getting. They're still getting money from us. Government-sponsored enterprise. It's not a free market enterprise.
Speaker Gingrich.
Congressman Paul, as you've been warning, we are on the brink of another government shutdown because of spending that you've called out of control. But haven't you contributed to that spending problem yourself, sir, supporting over the years earmarks that have benefited your district and your state? Back in 2009, you explained this by saying, if I can give my district any money back, I encourage that. I don't think that the federal government should be doing it, but if they're going to allot the money, I have a responsibility to represent my people. Isn't that what they call a mixed message, Congressman?
Well, it's a mixed question. This is a problem, because the real message is you should include in your question, also, you have never voted once for an earmark. No, it's a principle that I deal with, because if the government takes money from you and you fill out your tax form, you take your deductions. I look at that the same way in our communities. They take our money, they take our highway funds, and we have every right to apply for them to come back. Matter of fact, it's a bigger principle for me than that. I think this whole thing is out of control on the earmarks, because I think the Congress has an obligation to earmark every penny, not to deliver that power to the executive branch. What happens when you don't vote for the earmarks, it goes into the slush fund, the executive branch spends the money, then you have to grovel to the executive branch and beg and plead and say, oh, please return my highway funds to me. So it's this whole principle of budgeting that is messed up, but I never voted for an earmark, but I do argue the case for the people I represent to try to get their money back if at all possible.
But isn't that the same thing of having your cake and eating it too? You can complain about earmarks, but then if there are provisions there that help your district or your state, that's different. If 434 other members felt the same way, how would we ever fix the problem?
Yeah, but you're missing the point. I don't complain about earmarks because it's the principle of the Congress meeting their obligation. But if everybody did what I did, there would be no earmarks. The budget would be balanced, and we'd be cutting about 80% of the spending. So that would be the solution. Protect the process. You want to emphasize the responsibility of the Congress in not delivering more power to the president. I would be a different kind of president. I wouldn't be looking for more power. Everybody wants to be a powerful executive and run things. I, as a president, wouldn't want to run the world. I don't want to police individual activities and their lifestyle, and I don't want to run the economy. So that's like an entirely different philosophy, but it's very, very much in our tradition and in the tradition of our Constitution.
Congressman Paul, let me ask you, do you believe in what the two candidates have said, that it would potentially be okay to abolish courts like the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals entirely, or judges impeach them, if Congress and the president don't decide they don't like their rulings? Well,
the Congress can get rid of these courts if a judge misbehaves and is unethical and gets into trouble. The proper procedure is impeachment. But to subpoena judges before the Congress, I'd really question that. And if you get too careless about abolishing courts, that could open up a can of worms, because there could be retaliation. So it should be a more serious. Yes, we get very frustrated with this, but the whole thing is, if you just say, well, we're going to, okay, there are 10 courts, let's get rid of 3 this year because they ruled a way we didn't like. That to me is, I think, opening up a can of worms for us and would lead to trouble. But I really, really question this idea that the Congress could subpoena judges and bring them before us. That's a real affront to the separation of powers.
Governor Romney,
from my viewpoint, they're all good and they're all bad, because our country a long time ago split freedom up into 2 pieces: personal liberty and economic liberty. And the judges, as is the Congress, as the nation, think it's 2 issues. It's but 1 issue, so therefore Congress is split on this issue as well as our judges.
Last chance to say your name.
No, I'm not going to put it. All of them are good and all of them are bad.
Congresswoman Bachmann.